Roger's enough of a rock star that Roger gets recognized.
The gray hair.
Yeah. But I've learned that I can't take it for granted that people know Roger's credits, so I'm going to read off some of them. The Shawshank Redemption, Dead Man Walking, Fargo, Kundun, The Big Lebowski, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, The Man Who Wasn't There, A Beautiful Mind, Jarhead, No Country for Old Men, In the Valley of Ella, Doubt, The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, A Serious Man, Skyfall, True Grit, Prisoners, also with Denis Villeneuve, and Unbroken for Angelina Jolie. And then you have upcoming the Blade Runner sequel, we hope.
Yes, that will come up mentioned, yes.
It's on IMDb.
No, I know that.
And you're working now with the Coen Brothers again on Hail Caesar.
We're just doing a few little pickups for Hail Caesar at the weekend, and that'll be finished, yeah.
And you have another Angelina Jolie project, we hope.
Kind of I did, but that fell through a few months ago.
You think it'll come back?
Well, you should ask Angie about that. I really don't know.
I don't have her on my speed dial.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes films have their moment and then it passes. Like there was a film the brothers was going to do, To the White Sea, and I always thought that was going to come back, but that we scouted it and everything, and it just died. And yeah, it had its moment, and maybe somebody will make it, but yeah.
This one has been described as having a cruel landscape. Cruel, which is sort of an interesting word to apply to a landscape.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. Cool.
You don't feel that way?
No, I think it's got a wonderful landscape. I mean, it's a fascinating landscape. I've shot in New Mexico quite a lot of times, and yeah, and it's a wonderful place to shoot, a wonderful landscape to shoot. Cruel, I don't know. It's like No Country for Old Men. That's that Tommy Lee Jones's line about a hard cliche. It's a hard country, but it's also quite beautiful.
Well, this sort of takes that sort of Tommy Lee Jones, no Country for Old Men thing to the next level. It's a land of wolves now. This is a movie about a very, very harsh reality that Kate is being introduced to. How do you express that visually?
It's funny, you mentioned the other films we were talking. I mean, Assassination, Jesse James, for instance. When I first read this, I thought it was like the end of a sort of series of films that I've been lucky enough to work on that are mainly westerns, Jesse James and True Grit, obviously, but Valley of No Country, and it's coming up to the present, and this is the way it is now, kind of thing. So that was my sort of take on it, really, I suppose.
Well, you have done a lot of westerns, and there probably aren't that many people around today who can actually say that.
No, it's sad, isn't it? Yeah, they're not. That's so fashionable, I suppose.
Is there something different for you about approaching something that's set in the West or that is an actual period Western?
I mean, I think that depends very much on the director and the script. I mean, like the Assassination of Jesse James was very much a sort of a kind of tone poem. And to some extent, No Country was, but a much darker one. Whereas this is a much more linear narrative. It has a very strong drive, and the whole not the whole point of the film, but the cinematography and the way the film's put together is keeping that momentum going. It never lets you off the hook. It's that kind of film. So that's quite different than No Country, because No Country kind of goes off in tangents all the time and kind of metaphysical conversations or something, you know what I mean? But it's different kind of filmmaking.
I heard a stage director once talk about how at different moments in a play, different things can be the hero. Sometimes it's the acting, sometimes it's the sound, sometimes it's the lighting. And in a film where you have editing, you have cinematography, there are yet more things that can be the hero. When you worked through this script with Denny, were there moments where he said, I want you to carry the storytelling at this moment, or you agree that at this moment this is going to be something we're going to do with photography and not with dialogue, not with music?
Yeah, I mean, I love working with Denny because he start off having just a general discussion about the script, and we did this on Prisoners, and you go through the script and yeah, actually, you know, think about places where you could maybe lose the dialogue and do the same thing visually. Yeah, I'm not trying to think of an example, but I know that's the kind of approach we had to it. Yeah, but you know. Yeah, I mean, film is a visual medium. I mean, obviously, dialogue's important, but sometimes it's really easy to get something across with a visual rather than actually having somebody explain it.
There's that line from Hitchcock that in a movie, anytime someone has to actually say something, someone hasn't done their job.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, there's certainly a number of films that are being made that don't have any dialogue in them. You know.
By the way, we are going to take questions from the audience at the end, so if you have questions, get them ready. We'll probably do 10 or 15 minutes of that. We'll see how much stamina you have and we have. Let's talk about some of the specific things in this film. One of the more startling things that this film has is that night vision sequence. We actually have two different kinds of night vision. Tell us how you came to that.
Well, the problem with that sequence was, you know, I mean, you look at not just the tunnel, but the whole extension of the tunnel. So it was all a piece where they get out the SUV, they go down the hill, they go into the tunnel. At the beginning, the tunnel's dark. I mean, in our research, really, we found that the light, they only really have lights on in the tunnels on the Mexican side, strangely. But they do have this wonderful, you know, justification for a lot of light in the tunnel, you know, bare bulbs and that's what they do. So there's this whole sequence you have in your mind about what that should look like and transition from one to the other. And then so they go down the hill in the sunset into the blackness and they disappear, the silhouettes disappear into that black. So then you're saying it's black and they have to put on this vision systems in order to see. So you can't really do, you know, a Hollywood moonlight. It doesn't make sense. I was agonizing about that, and Denny saw I was troubled, I think. And we had I said, I can't get my head around this. How can we do objective shots when it's meant to be pitch black? And then we want to see night, you know, see through their night vision as well. And he said, well, if there's something else we can do, we could play it maybe all in their point of view, in somebody's point of view. So that's when we thought, well, let's do it with infrared and night vision. So we actually use the infrared as Alejandro's point of view. He's the only one with infrared system. Some people don't quite get that, but it's established as they get out of the SUV. And so I think it's less confusing, but in a way, visually, it's more confusing, which is kind of interesting. And there's only one shot. We did a couple of sort of silhouette shots where they're really, really dark to give the effect that objectively it's incredibly dark. And we just did the one shot of the guy coming in the entrance of the tunnel and drawing his knife out. And that's like the only objective shot in the sequence till you get in the tunnel, and then there's lights, and then you can play what you want, you know.
So do you do the infrared? Did you actually shoot with an infrared camera or with an infrared rig?
Yeah, we had an infrared camera from this company called FLIR. That is a scientific camera. I mean, we could rent it out, but they let us have it for free for a few days. Yeah, we tested it. We played around with it, and at one point I got the prop guy to put his boots on a heater. So when he walked on the floor, he left these hot footprints on the ground. And I realized you could follow the footprints. I went to Denny and said, it would be great to follow the footprints. And you could watch them dissolve if you held them long enough. It was a really cool image.
Yes, it's something I've never seen. It's really done creatively in this film too. You know, with the night vision, are you actually able to light for night vision?
Well, the thing is, it's hard for the actors and actually the Steadicam operator, Bella Trues, because actually Bella can see his monitor and he's got the image, but the actors didn't have night vision systems.
They just got goggles.
They had prop.
They had prop goggles.
So they're wandering around in complete darkness. I can see on the DIT monitor, I can see what Bella's got on his Steadicam, so we had a chance. But it was actually where our location was so dark and it was so sort of murky that I did actually light it, but I had a 12 by 12 bounce on a 60-foot crane with a tiny little 1K onto it. I mean, everybody knows what 1K is, it's like nothing. And it was like, 150 feet or 200 feet away from the subject. So it was the funniest thing, this film shoot with this big bounce, this tiny little light doing a whole night shoot. But it gave it that little bit of edge to the lighting and a little bit of contrast, a bit more snap than it would have been if it hadn't been lit at all,
I said you can actually do creative lighting for night fishing.
Well, you can, but if you light it too much, you could put a lot of light on it and light it up, but then all that sort of nice little white dots and all that kind of grain, the noise disappears and you get too clean an image. And then he was very, he really wanted it to be a distressed image. So we shot virtually wide open, but it just gave it that little bit of edge.
Now you started shooting documentaries and music videos when it was film. You might have even caught the end of the Technicolor era.
Hey, I'm not that old.
Well, they didn't
shoot Technicolor.
You never shot Technicolor.
I mean, the Godfather was printed Technicolor, but there's a confusion about shooting Technicolor 3-strip and printing 3-strip.
Now it's digital cameras, and you've been your own operator all the time, correct?
Yeah, because I started in documentaries, I can't really give it up. And I think it's the best job on the set operating, because you're the closest to the actors, you're closest to what's going on, and completely in touch with what the camera's doing. I could never get used to having somebody else. I mean, I say that, but Bella was doing the Steadicam, I'm not doing Steadicam. It's a very specialist thing, and I don't, in that situation, I work with an operator, but generally I operate, yeah.
And did you have a second unit on this as well?
Bella did some pick-up shots, I believe, but only like 1 or 2 landscapes. I'm not sure they're in the film actually. And then we had an aerial unit.
And talk about making sure all of that fits together and is cohesive and it feels like a whole.
Yeah, well, I think that's the hardest thing. I mean, that's the trick, I think, of cinematography, is that everybody knows, you're shooting out of order. You shoot shots in a certain sequence out of order, like the opening, and the bashing in the SWAT house and everything. Well, that's a combination of 2 different days shooting on a location that was like 4 weeks apart, the 2 days were 4 weeks apart, I think, because of the weather or something. And a set with a backing that's photographed to match the exterior location, and that's shot another, week after the, what I mean? It's all piecemeal, and so it's not only within the scene, but obviously scene to scene, you're all over the place. It's a real kind of jigsaw, and I always say I think the hardest thing and the trick of cinematography is creating a unified whole, visually. So the audience isn't sort of taken out of the film at any point.
This film has so many looks, and yet it does feel unified. What do you feel like, from your point of view, are the things that bring it together?
Well, I think it's a style thing. I mean, it's obviously you maintain the same feel of the camera movement, and obviously for the actors as well, it's important they maintain a continuity from one scene to another when, again, they're miles apart, but actually it's happening 5 minutes later or something. Yeah, it's just that sort of sensibility that you put to the film, really. Yeah.
You talk about it being a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. Walk us through how much planning you can do in advance and how much you have to discover on the day when you're there with the actors in the place.
Personally, I don't think you can do too much planning. The extreme maybe is with the Coen brothers, that everything's storyboarded and we really go through everything really, really carefully. Not that you necessarily shoot the storyboards, but you've always done that kind of planning. I mean, we did on Sicario and Prisoners, really, because they're films where you don't really have the budget to spend it. You can't have a Technicrane sitting in the parking lot for the whole shoot unless you're using it every day, and we certainly don't. So you bring it in for a day and let it go. I prepare. I say you storyboard certain numbers of the sequences. The shootout of the border crossing, for instance, you know, there's maybe 45 shots or something. Well, I take all those shots and sort of write it down, and then I order it. And if you're shooting like 3 different days, I'll say, well, I want that shot done at between 8 and 10 in the morning, and that shot done at like 11 o'clock. That shot can be done in the evening because the sun will be over there. That shot can be done midday when I don't like the light, or when the cloud comes over, because we're inside the car and nobody's going to notice the light's changed. So you do all this kind of jigsaw of shooting order, and I sit down with the AD and work it out, and obviously relate to Denny and make sure he's comfortable with it. But yeah, it's like a battle plan. So, you know, so everything you shoot's on the screen. It's not, you're not wasting time, you know, screwing it out when you should be shooting.
It's funny that you talk about that, because if it's done right, if you follow that battle plan, as an audience, if someone watching the film, you don't notice. It just looks natural. But I have seen a film, I don't want to name it, so let's just call it Transformers. There's a scene, it's an action scene, and it was obviously shot at every different time of day. And just as you cut from shot to shot, it's the only time I've ever been aware of the shots really not matching. And I thought, okay, he just doesn't care. It's not what, he's not worried about that.
Well, I mean, but yeah, there's sometimes you have to wear it. I mean, sometimes it's you literally don't have the money and the time to do it. I don't know, one of my favourite Scorsese films is Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. You watch the scenes between Ellen Burstyn and the kid in the car. You look at one side and it's almost dark, it's twilight. You look at the other way, it's noon. I mean, on a cross-cut, and I didn't notice that till I seen the film 3 times, because you're so engrossed in the story. So, you know, maybe this is anyway, so why do I bother? No, I think it's really important, even subliminally, if I could pronounce that word, it really makes a difference that you know, that nothing jumps, even if you're not aware of it, that, well, you are somehow subconsciously, that jump is distracting you from the story.
And I had an editor talk to us last year at Variety about how if somebody takes you out of the movie and you stop for a moment and you have to think, wait, what? Then you're losing the thread of the story for a few seconds. If that happens often enough in a film, you've lost the thread altogether.
Or in the case of a film like this, you lose the momentum. You know,
That's
because
true.
you want that pace, you want that kind of urgency all the time. You know?
I have to admit, when I saw this, I was not able to follow everything that was going on. The plot is complex, it's very dense, and people are deceiving each other. And then you have the whole thing with the Mexican cop, which seems to be completely unrelated until it isn't. And yet at the end it all comes together. Our American ears come to understand, is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, originally it was a bit more cross-cutting between different characters, actually. The character of Manuel was, you know, the swimming pool, the kid swimming was introduced earlier. And there was also a scene with Alejandro very early on in the film, which had no relationship to the rest of the movie, but was just in there as a kind of, like, I guess a teaser and a sense of his character before he actually appeared in any connection with the other characters. But then he said, you know, we did shoot this scene, and it was the only scene that we shot that's not in the film, otherwise everything's there. But he said, no, the problem was that it distracted from the film being about Kate, and you had to establish her straight away, you know.
The Rolling Stone review, which is posted outside this theater, talks about how much of the story is carried by Emily Blunt's face. And I, as someone who has dabbled in photography, I know how hard it is to capture a face perfectly, so that you don't miss the great take, you don't miss the great reaction. Can you talk about that challenge from your point of view as a DP and as a camera operator?
Well, I think one of the roles of the cinematographer is, I mean, the cinematographer really runs the floor crew, you know, really, and it's their job, his or her job, to really create the space for the actor, because if you don't have a performance, you don't have a film. Mine, you don't have a film, because I don't really care for, you know, action films that don't have characters in them and stuff. And you know, so that, I think that's a very important part of the job, creating that space, and then you judge it with, you know, like Denny and I would talk about. I mean, I might have an idea of the order I'd like to do for a scene in terms of lighting, but then, you know, he would talk to the actors, and maybe you wanted to, sometimes we shoot, I think there was one scene, I think the end scene in the kitchen, I'm pretty sure we shot Emily's close-up before we did anything else. So, you know, you balance your approach to it depending on, you know, how the actor's feeling if they're into the part, or maybe sometimes an actor wants to get into the part, so you'll shoot all the reactions to their performance before you'll shoot their actual, you know, dialogue. Yeah, it's all, yeah.
Let's go to questions from the audience. I'm going to call on people, and there will be microphones going around the house. We don't have microphones? All right. Then I'll tell you what. If you stand up and you shout out your question, I will make sure to repeat it so everybody can hear it. How's that for a plan? Okay, hands for anybody who has a question right up here in the middle.
Hey, I have a question about during some of the car scenes when it appeared that the camera was handheld, but you were going over big bumps, and I'm just wondering how you.
During the car scene, the camera appeared to be handheld, but the cars were going over bumps. How did you manage to do that?
No, it was the two different remote heads. One time we had it on a stripped down Libra head, which it becomes like a 2-axis little Libra head. When we were actually in Mexico, I'm trying to think now. The other head we had was a mini scorpion head. I think it's called a micro scorpion head, and it's about yay big. And with the Alexa on it, it's like really tiny, and it fits in the car really well. So, I mean, you know, for years we've always had to do either hang on the outside of the car with a fluid head and operate it. You know, sometimes we'd build rigs on the outside of the car so I could sit out there and operate crazy shots. But now you can use remote heads, so you can get this slight bit of movement with the camera. So it gives it a slight fluidity rather than a kind of lock-off feel. So it's a combination. I mean, all the bouncy stuff going fast through Mexico City was done with a Libra head, rigged in different places.
Question? I got plenty. Or there's one back there. Okay. Yes, no?
Oh, sorry. So the scene before they go into the tunnel, that whole kind of like magic hour segment where they're prepping and putting on the gear and
You're talking about the Twilight before they go into the tunnel.
Was that, I mean, if you could do that in one day, that'd be amazing, but how long did that particular scene, because I mean, there's such a
How long did that take to shoot? How many days?
such a moment of time that you can shoot that particular skyline.
Yeah, we got to shoot really quickly.
Yeah.
We shot, as they're getting out of the SUV, we shot all but 2 close-ups on the first night. I think both evenings we ended up going from there down to do the night work with a tunnel. You know, because the location was about a couple of miles from where we did the exterior of the tunnel. So yeah, the first night we did all but 2 close-ups, and the second night the clouds weren't nearly the same, but we only had 2 close-ups left where they're getting out of the SUV and putting their gear together. And on that same night, we had a long track laid out to do that one where they all disappeared down into blackness, the side shot. But, you know, basically we got there on the first day with plenty of light and mapped the whole scene out. And I had the track for the long shot, another tracking shot I think I had laid out well in advance, you know, so you just sort of leapfrog from one shot to another. But yeah, this is the sort of thing you really got to, you really got to prep to get it. I mean, the same thing would happen when they go on the rooftop to watch the gunfire in Juarez. I mean, we didn't do that in one night, in one evening. I mean, we couldn't do all those shots. We did all but one of them, but, you know.
Quick show of hands from the audience. How many people here do not know what a digital intermediate is? That's fewer than I expected. So for people who do not know what that is, I'm going to summarize it as Photoshop for movies. Is that a fair one-line description of what you
It is really, yeah.
So with something like that, where you're trying to match shots from a single scene from two different twilights, two different evenings, two different sunsets, how much does then DI come into play to match those shots up?
Well, it definitely helps, I won't lie, it definitely helps. I mean, yeah, it gives you more flexibility than if you were just doing film finish, but also shooting on digital capture gives you that little bit more flexibility than if you shot on negative, you know, so yeah, each gives you that little bit of advantage, a little bit of more latitude, and, yeah, a little bit more, you can bring things up and knock things down.
When I started covering this stuff 10 years ago, the word that we would get was, well, shooting digital was cheaper, but it would slow you down because you had to light more carefully because the cameras didn't have the same latitude as film. And now that seems to have completely flipped, where the cameras are very forgiving.
I don't like the way you said light more carefully. I don't think I light less carefully or shoot less carefully. I can just shoot a little bit longer. And I can sleep at night because I don't have to wait for the lab report in the morning. I know what I've got, you know? Which is actually the most important thing. I think that's why I shoot digital. There's no other reason. It's just a sleep factor.
Just one last thing to stress about. And you can, but those cameras really do give you more latitude.
Well, I mean, yeah, they give you more latitude, but the camera, I shoot on an Arri Alexa, and it's a base of 800 ASA, you know, film stock's 500, and I never pushed film stock like that, not high speed stock, so you've got that advantage. You know. But you know, you go back to the DI, yeah, you can paint it quite a bit, like the two close-ups we didn't get the first night, well, there weren't the same clouds the second night, so I did cheat and paint in a little bit of cloud. There's no CG, it's kind of me doing it. I mean, I know a lot of people would just, you know, CG the background, what the hell. But, you know, this wasn't that kind of film, there wasn't kind of budget, you know. And frankly, I think the more you can do in camera, the better, because even CG is fantastic, but there's something about it that always kind of not quite right, you know. It's those kind of, the kind of reality, you can't get the reality, because it's all those odd things that happen on the camera that you can't create. I mean, I've worked quite a bit, sorry going on now, but I worked a lot in animation, you know, and consulting on animated films. And it's really hard to create those kind of odd things that happen naturally with light, and the way light hits people and the way people are in a real situation,
Yeah, you don't get anything for free in animation. Everything has to be built.
Right, but you know, what I'm saying is just trying to imagine exactly what it's like in reality. And it's all too clean, it's all too correct somehow. You know, reality is not that easy.
Question from the audience? Right here.
This may not be a good question, but is there any way in which you hope an audience member would leave one of your movies and look at the world differently after?
Is there any way you would hope an audience member would leave one of your movies and look at the world differently?
Well, I always say that. I mean, it's got nothing to do with cinematography, but I always hope that I'm working on films that leave the audience posing, you know, with trying to answer a question, thinking about the subjects. I mean, this film, surely in particular, it doesn't offer any answers, and there are no answers, but I mean, that's kind of its point. I think it relates to a lot of issues now, not just the war on drugs, but the war on terror, you know, all this kind of stuff. I mean, what are we doing, you know?
A related question, somebody once said that writing is a fundamentally aggressive act because you're trying to get someone to experience the world through your point of view as the writer. As a DP, you are imposing your vision of, you know, your view of this story on an audience. Do you feel like that's an aggressive act? Do you feel like you're trying to put your images in someone's head?
No, I think because, you could take that, you could say that about the writer if you like, or the director, but no, I mean, I'm working from the script and the director's view, you know, I mean, in that sense. I mean, I think make a contribution in terms of the development of the style of the film, but it's still very much from the script and the director's viewpoint of that script.
Questions? Let's go back over there.
I wanted to ask you about Skyfall. How did you kind of balance bringing your own sensibilities to that movie with it being part of such an iconic series?
Well, it was quite easy, really, because when I talked to Sam about that, I mean, I'd done 2 films with Sam previous, and I was very nervous about doing it just in terms of the way we're going to work, because some of those films are usually shot with multiple crews and hundreds of cameras. And we talked about it, and we basically shot it as a 1-camera shoot, so it wasn't really any different for me than, we had 2 cameras all the time, and sometimes we used 11 cameras, but basically we approached it the same way as the other 2 films I'd done with Sam, and any other film really. So it wasn't that different, other than it being, a kind of lot bigger and sort of, a lot bigger.
Any questions from women? Come on, we've got here.
I'd like to know, when you're in your creative headspace doing your leisure things, what catches your eye?
In your creative headspace, doing your leisure thing, what catches your eye?
What do you mean, doing my leisure thing?
Anything in your free time that's enjoyable and not work related?
Yeah, I go fishing. We just spent a couple of months in England, in Devon, where I was brought up. I have a little boat. I go out in the ocean, and I fish. Not a very good season. I caught some bass, but I didn't get one as big as I wanted to. So that was really frustrating. I think my wife is fed up with eating fish.
Yes, okay, over here. How much of the movie was lit practically?
I don't know what that means really, because we mean with practical lights, or we mean what's in practically with what's in the truck. I don't know.
You talking about with available light?
Available light and maybe like bulbs, just bulbs.
Well, you see, that's it. We have bulbs on the trucks and then bulbs at home. No, I'm odd things that I make up. I'm a gaffer. 2 gaffers I work with, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. They've got a garage full of stuff we've made up over the years. And I've got a whole lot of stuff at home. And I make up all these sort of rigs with the kind of things you can buy in Home Depot or wherever, you know what I mean? So the difference between whether I put a practical light here on a table lamp to light somebody's face, or I use an 18K bounced off a rag or something, it's a blurred edge,
What was your favorite rig for this movie?
What was your favorite rig for this movie?
Favorite rig?
For lighting.
For lighting.
Well, I think it's favorite when you don't need any rig. No, I don't know. I don't have a favorite rig. You can say, well, it's really, big lighting setup's really hard, but you could say something like the like Homeland Security thing with the glass. That was hard to light, but that was all practical. That was all rig, that was fluorescence, the little gags we put up, so that was all there, and the only thing on the floor was a couple of small lights with bounce just for the actors' faces. That's fun to do, but then, the kitchen at the end was only a few lights, but that was satisfying because it's so minimal and it's just shooting their faces, and it's such a sort of seemingly simple scene, but I think the light complemented what was within it, and so I've got no favourites in terms of that, Every shot has its own, demands and, questions.
I interviewed, I did a book on the making of Rango, and I talked to John Knoll about working with you. I think it was the first time you and I ever spoke, was over the phone for Rango.
Right.
And John talked about how at ILM they're very used to simulation. They're out to create a desert scene that is the most realistic desert sunlight they can possibly create. And then when they spoke to you, and it was like, well, yeah, but if I were lighting that scene, I would do this, and I'd put somebody to take the shadow down a little bit, and they had never thought about actually lighting a scene, so as they'd always been thinking about simulating it. So tell us about, for you, using tools to do more than just sort of capture what a practical light would give you on the set.
Well, there's two things on that, because in Rango, working with John and Tim Alexander up at ILM there, I mean, yeah, there's two things we were doing. It was like the angle of the light, even on a day exterior in Rango, it was the angle of the sun, how you were going to play the scene. And the funny thing is, they're so religious about keeping the sun exactly where it is in the sky for the whole scene. But you don't do that when you're doing live action. So I said, why are you doing that? The sun should be where you want it for that shot. Nobody's going to notice it's there on one shot and slightly over there on another, or even over there. And that relates to that border battle scene in Sicario, which is shot over 3 days or whatever it was. And you start in the morning at 7 o'clock, and there's a really low sun over there, and you finish and it's really low over here. But I don't think there's more than 1 or 2 shots in that scene that kind of, if you really look at it, bump out. It's fairly smooth, but it's shot for 3 days with the sun going like that, and then the sun going in as well. So, you know what I mean? You make the light work for you by saying, well, I want to do this shot this time of day, this shot this time of day. That's what I was saying earlier, you know. And I couldn't understand with ILM on Rango, and I've got the DreamWorks on animation as well. They religiously leave the sun in the same place for every shot. I said, why? It doesn't matter. You just light the shot. Yeah.
And in the old westerns, you notice that you could have one of those gunfights with people either in the street and they're both backlit.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You watch any of English cameraman David Watkins' work, every shot's backlit. You watch that film, Dick Lester's Robin and Marion, every shot in the film backlit. Looks great. Such a good film. Yeah, you never notice.
All right, more questions. Let's go over to there. Yeah.
So you've made several films in New Mexico, and I'm just wondering what your favorite or best part of shooting there.
You've made several films in New Mexico. What's your favorite or best part of shooting there?
To be flippant, it's the producer's favorite because it's tax breaks.
Welcome to Hollywood in the 21st century.
I mean, I like shooting there. I mean, I like the landscapes. I like the sort of emptiness. It's almost like being on the ocean, you know, some places. Obviously, I like that. And the crews are really good there now, you know. So, I mean, the more I've been there, the more comfortable I am there. Sometimes, like the Sicario, it can be a bit frustrating because you can't get all the locations you exactly want. You're struggling to find the right locations. And that whole thing, you know, going to Mexico, I mean, the producers did want to shoot everything in Albuquerque, and I don't blame them, but you just can't do it. You just can't get Mexico in Albuquerque, and, you know, so.
Yeah, they're totally different.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have time for 2 more questions. I haven't got anybody from back up there. Yes.
Do you have a favorite on-set memory, just in your career, that made you really glad you shoot movies for a living?
Do you have a favorite on-set memory that made you really glad you shoot movies for a living?
Yeah, it was one of the first films I ever did. It was with Richard Burton and John Hurt. It was 1984, and at the end of I think it was the second day we had Richard Burton on the set. The AD came round at lunchtime and said, Mr. Burton wants to see everybody at the end of the day outside of his trailer. And, you know, I don't know, I was 30 or whatever. And we were all really young. I think my gaffer then was about 24, I think. And it was like his first film. So we were all kind of nervous, thinking this is it, you know. And so at the end of the day's shoot, we were all standing around his trailer, which was a tiny little caravan. It wasn't, in those days it wasn't a trailer, it was like a literal 2-wheel caravan, you know. And anyway, he came out and he said, thank you. I just wanted to thank you for one of the nicest experiences I've ever had on a movie. He said, when I came on the set yesterday and saw so many young faces, I was absolutely mortified and so nervous. He said, but you just it was just wonderful. It was just, whoa, that was great. You know what I mean? So I always remembered that. I thought that was really something.
And time for one more question. In the back there, yes. No, don't look behind you. You're the one.
Hi. So on Sicario, I was just wondering what was the biggest challenge or problem that you faced, and how did you solve that problem?
Biggest challenge or problem you faced on Sicario, and how did you solve it?
Well, the biggest one was that border, that whole, the whole journey going across the border into Mexico and coming back, because you can't shoot on the bridge of the Americas between El Paso and Juarez. So we agonized for a long time about how to do that. So we could shoot on a road where you see Juarez through the fence in El Paso. So we had a scene we could do there. We shot another shot that went towards the border, just with the SUVs in El Paso. And we shot helicopter shots of the border, and they're CG'd in the SUVs going across the border, because obviously we couldn't drive anybody across, and certainly not time it to a helicopter shot if we could. Then all the stuff with the SUVs were meant to be in Mexico, were shot in Mexico City, except when you get to the jail, and they get the guy out in the courtyard of the jail. The courtyard of the jail is in Albuquerque, which we shot much earlier in the schedule, so it's like weeks and weeks. All these things are weeks and weeks separated. But I insisted on we shoot that scene before 11 o'clock in the morning. We had to do the whole scene before 11 in the morning because I didn't want to shoot it with any sunlight, because I'd never been in Mexico City, but I imagined it would be cloudy and smoggy. Or even if it wasn't, I could justifiably have something in shade. But if it was sunny in the courtyard and then nothing else was sunny, it wouldn't make any sense. So we managed to shoot that scene before 11 in the morning. And then when they come back across the border and they get trapped in the traffic and there's the big shootout. Now the big question is like where we did that, you know. So we ended up basically building a road on a parking lot in the middle of Albuquerque, and putting a fence down either side, got the Mexican border post kind of one side of it. It's like you see it one side but you can't look at it both ways. And so 60 or 70, no, maybe 70 or 80% of the shots we could do live on this set. But when you look in towards Mexico, when you're looking towards the bridge and America, we put up like a 200-foot blue screen either end so that they could extend the backgrounds a bit. So, you know, as I said before, it's like a jigsaw puzzle that you have to kind of work through. You work which shots you want, and then you kind of figure out, well, how do I do that section, that section. And then the hard thing is how you order it within the shoot and get a consistency to it, so you don't suddenly go from one look to another during the sequence. Yeah. That was particularly hard because, I mean, mainly because we didn't have the time and the budget, you know.
We are out of time. I want to tell you that if you want to hear more from Roger about Sicario, we have a video interview that we'll be posting on Variety.com on September 29th at 11 a.m. Pacific, where we had a longer conversation about this on video, and we're going to be, so you can be able to see more about the film and hear more from Roger. Thank you all for staying. We've had a long time. Thank you, Roger Deakins.